If you're seeing this video, then you're in a space where you're between who you were and who you're becoming. I've been thinking about this concept a lot lately about how oftentimes when we think we're in a room, we're actually in a hallway and not a room. And I think you can look at those rooms as these more known definitive states of being. We've all been there. Things seem good, happy, predictable, maybe dependable, consistent. Maybe it's the people we have in our lives. It's a job. Things sort of seem settled, right? They're these spaces of light and usually a known space, right? Which is why it feels like there's a light on in there. And usually these spaces come with goodness and sort of the known versus the unknown. And when you're in this sort of transitional state where your identity begins to dissolve, it's easy to think that the light in the room that you were in has been turned off. But truly, you're in a hallway. And in that hallway space, things get very, very dark. Sometimes this is the dark night of the soul. Sometimes this is that deep shadow work that people like Carl Jung talk about. And if you're watching this, you've likely been through this before. You're going through this the first time. This is now a known thing for you. And you're likely looking for some direction, some answers. And as someone who's been through that space myself, I've recently been thinking about this metaphor a lot more. In that hallway, the light is off. And that is because we are diving deep into the ego, the fear, the subconscious, the darkness, the things that make us feel lost, right? Make us feel like we are wandering through a room bumping into walls, not knowing where anything is, feeling like where did the light go? Why was it turned off? And when we get stuck in this space, we fail to recognize that we have to attune to that darkness, right? When our eyes have to adjust to the dark, it takes time, it takes space, it takes energy, and a patience, right? First, we have to calm down. And I think that is something so critical, right? Is regulating our nervous system, calming down. And when we do that, we can recognize the space that we're in, and we can see that that darkness is encroaching around us so that we can find the next room. And that next room often is revealed when we can sort of see the light below the doorway. And that's often the next higher timeline, a higher frequency of ours. It's our intuition. It's the self that we're becoming, right? And so when we panic in the darkness and we don't take time to regulate ourselves, to learn what we're going to learn in that dark space, we often fail to see that light behind that next door that's just creaking out of the bottom, or maybe just creaking out of the side. And there might be many doors, but until we recognize that it's a hallway space that we're passing through and not a room, we now have more control over the situation. And it's not that we're striving for control, but I think there's an attunement, right? And that's what the dark is asking of us. And I think when we're in that space, it's so frightening because we're usually not familiar with it. It's usually unmapped. And we feel, I think, the fear and the ego and the old stories and the things that have not served us prior almost beckoning us to go deeper into the dark, beckoning us to walk backwards in this hallway, right? And I think when you're in a transformational space, ultimately, the only way is forward. And usually that is the only direction that the universe is even going to let you go. But you can either do it lightly or you can do it heavily. And I think when you begin to do it lightly, when you begin to recognize that you're in a transitional space, you can start to see, okay, this is the opportunity to let that old identity dissolve. This is the identity that worked before in that old room and is no longer going to work if I want to enter this new doorway. And I think that becomes the key to that doorway, because sometimes we see the light below that door and we arrive at it and the door is locked. And I think the key to unlocking that is that self-knowing, the the waiting in the fire, the patience in the dark, until we actually find intuition, because there's fear. And as we dig through that soil of fear, all that dirt, we find that intuition. And then when we find that, we can connect to ourselves, we regulate ourselves, we look inside, and we find a clarity on what our purpose is next. And that's usually when we can unlock that door. And then that's the space where the person who you're becoming is held. And then when you enter that room, not only do you look backwards and that light from the room illuminates that hallway you were in, giving context, giving clues and answers to why it was the way it was, why it looked the way it looked. And that's usually when we look back and we realize this had to happen in this way. But we have to find faith and patience and regulation to actually bring ourselves into a space of knowing to actually get to that next person we're becoming. And I know that it's hard. I know that it's been a journey, and believe me, I would give you a big hug if I could. It's a challenging space. It's harrowing. Sometimes it takes a Herculean effort to make it through these hallways, but there are going to be many of these in our lifetime, and some are a lot darker than others. And I think there's a key in there, which is knowing that you're in a transition. You are right around the corner from a transformational doorway that is going to lead you into your next reality, but you just have to tap in, and you have to recognize where you're at. And I think that in those moments, those frequencies of fear, those lower expressions of human emotion, fear, energy, vibration, they're going to get really, really strong. And that is almost when you want to double down, when you have to say, okay, can I wait this out? Can I ground myself in a way? And when you do that, these higher expressions, these higher frequencies, which are almost like music that are humming behind this new door, this door to your new reality, your new personality, you have to listen for that. And when you listen for that, it'll guide you. And this is something that I think any of us can do. And the key to doing this is going to be breath work. It's going to be meditation. It's going to be grounding ourselves through activities that connect us to a more coherent heart space. That can be positive people, positive music, activities that have somatic and traumatic releases, and building this toolbox, this repertoire of things that get us through the dark is so, so critical. And I think if you want to manifest the things that you want in your life, if you want to level up as a person, if that's financial, if that's romantic, if that's a vision you have for your creative career, even for myself, I've seen that when you actually willingly stumble around in the dark and map that area out, you come out on the other side so much more deeply self-knowing. The self-intimacy is on a whole other level. And I think this is exactly what people are talking about when they're talking about quantum jumping, timeline shifts, leveling up your frequency, leveling up your energy, your vibration. And so if that hasn't always made sense to you, I want you to think about it like you are walking through a hallway to a brightly lit room that you may have to learn how to open with the keys that you have inside of yourself. And when you do that, you're going to experience reality in a much, much different way, and you're going to see those transformational elements. And the next time you see that hallway, you're going to willingly walk through it, and it may not be easy, but you will know what's waiting on the other side for you, which is your new reality, your new personality, right? And so I know you're watching this. If you're feeling lost, if you're feeling uncertain if you've been through a dark night of the soul recently. And I cannot encourage you enough to do those activities that get you clear enough to see, hear, feel, smell, and know the direction that you're going in. And I know that you are literally around the corner from that timeline shift. So give yourself the time and the energy. That's what I can say. Make that knowing that self-intimacy your priority. And when you do that and you live out of that space that's connected to yourself, you're going to really watch your world change. And I hope that you connected to that in this message. And if you did, let me know what you're going through in the comments. Tell me how you're navigating it. Tell me what you resonated with. I'd love to hear it. Throw me a like, throw me a subscribe. It helps out a lot. And I will see you guys on the next video. Thank you.